Today, we're digging into one of the greatest rivalries in racing history, period. It's a legendary showdown that was about so much more than just speed. We're talking about massive egos, raw ambition, and a bitter all-out quest for revenge on the world's toughest racetrack. This is the real story of Ford versus Ferrari.
So, to really get this rivalry, you gotta understand the two men at the center of it all. In one corner, you have the old world of motorsport, embodied by Enzo Ferrari. This guy was a former driver who built a racing empire that was just synonymous with winning. And in the other corner, the new world, the brute force of American industry. Henry Ford II, the head of a global powerhouse but a total rookie when it came to Europe's elite racing circuits. Now you might think this epic fight started on the track, right? But no, its real origin story is in the boardroom. It all kicked off with a huge business deal back in 1963 that just went spectacularly, epically wrong.
Okay, so get this. Ford was literally on the brink of buying Ferrari. They'd spent 22 days hammering out the details. The deal was ready to sign. But at the very last second, Enzo Ferrari, a man who was fiercely protective of his company, just walked away. The deal breaker? A tiny clause that said he'd have to get his racing budget approved by Ford. For a man like Enzo, that wasn't just business. That was a personal insult he simply couldn't swallow.
But, there's another, more cynical way to look at it. Some people think Ferrari was never actually serious about selling to the Americans at all. The theory is that he played them brilliantly, using Ford's massive offer as a bargaining chip to squeeze a better deal out of another Italian company, Fiat, which, by the way, is exactly what ended up happening. Smart, right? So the deal was dead, and Henry Ford II was left completely humiliated on the world stage. His response was simple and direct. If he couldn't buy Ferrari, he was going to bury Ferrari. And he was going to do it at their own game, on the biggest stage of them all, the 24 Hours of Le Mans.
And let me tell you, Ford did not hold back. We're talking about a reported $10 million. I mean, that's just an astronomical amount of money in the 1960s, all poured into one single goal: build a car that could finally dethrone the king.
But as it turns out, you can't just buy a Le Mans victory. While Ferrari was busy racking up 6 straight wins, Ford's debut was a complete train wreck. In 1964, not a single one of their cars finished the race. And then in 1965, it happened again. It was a total public embarrassment. After getting their butts kicked 2 years in a row, Ford knew they needed a whole new playbook. So they assembled a dream team. First, they brought in the legend himself, Carroll Shelby, a guy who'd actually won Le Mans as a driver, to run the whole show. And with him came Ken Miles, this absolutely brilliant but notoriously hot-headed British driver and engineer who just knew how to wring every last ounce of speed out of a car. Their mission? To perfect the new beast, the Ford GT40 MKII. And that brings us to the main event, 1966. After years of failure and humiliation, Ford rolls back into Le Mans. But this time was different. They weren't there just to compete. Oh no, they were there to dominate. And they showed up with a level of force the racing world had literally never seen before.
I mean, just look at these numbers. This tells you everything you need to know about Ford's strategy. It was pure, overwhelming brute force. A confident Ferrari showed up with their usual 2 official cars. Ford unloaded a fleet of 8. The plan was basically to win through sheer numbers and reliability, to just wear the competition down.
And boy, did it work. Ferrari's whole challenge just completely crumbled. In a shocking turn, neither of their cars even made it to the finish line. For Enzo Ferrari, it was an absolute disaster. And for Henry Ford, well, the path to revenge was suddenly wide open.
You'd think, with Ferrari out of the picture, the race was over, right? Wrong. The drama was far from over. In fact, it just shifted. The battle was no longer Ford versus Ferrari. In those final hours, it became Ford versus Ford, all because of a hugely controversial call from the executives up in the box.
So as the race is winding down, Ford is in a position of just unbelievable dominance. They're running first, second, and third. The car driven by Ken Miles and Denny Hulme is comfortably in the lead, just cruising towards what should have been a clear, historic victory. And this is where the story just takes a wild, controversial turn. Ford's racing director, Leo Beebe, he gets this idea for a killer photo op,
all three Fords crossing the finish line together, a perfect marketing image. So he orders Ken Miles, who's way out in front, to slow down and let the other two cars catch up. Miles, not happy about it, does what he's told. The three cars cross the line together for the cameras. But here's the crazy part. The race officials declared Bruce McLaren the winner because his car started further back and had technically covered more distance. The PR stunt totally backfired, and it robbed Ken Miles of his well-deserved victory.
So Ford got its revenge. They beat Ferrari in the most spectacular way imaginable. But that victory was immediately clouded by controversy. And what followed was just tragic for the one man who should have been the hero of the whole story.
Years later, Leo Beebe, the guy who made that infamous call, tried to explain himself. He said he was just terrified his hyper-competitive drivers would end up taking each other out, wrecking Ford's massive investment right at the finish line. But even he admitted he had real difficulties with the decision, knowing the firestorm it created.
And here's where the story becomes a true tragedy. Just 2 months after having that historic Le Mans win snatched away from him, Ken Miles was killed in a crash while testing the next Ford race car. The brilliant, fiery driver, who is the absolute heart and soul of that winning program, was gone, without ever getting the credit he so richly deserved.
But despite all the controversy and the tragedy, you can't deny that the 1966 win changed everything. It kicked off a Ford dynasty at Le Mans. They came back and won again in '67, then again in '68, and again in '69. A 4-year run of dominance that completely rewrote the history books.
So how do we look back at Le Mans '66? Was it the ultimate story of corporate revenge, a historic triumph of American muscle over European finesse, or was it something else? A hollow victory maybe? A win that will forever be tainted by a corporate decision that stole the glory from the driver who earned it most? That's the question that still hangs over this incredible story.